The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings, everybody. I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate negative 269092.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be continuing our mini series of these webinars talking about mission readiness. We did a video a couple of months back on the concept of mission readiness and what it's all about. And I'm embarking now on a series of at least 3 of these webinars, might turn into more in the future, delving into the different forms that mission readiness can take. So the first one in this little series was the physical side of mission readiness, there being the 3 principal legs of mission readiness that I see. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's remind ourselves what mission readiness is. What do we mean by that concept? And before we do that, I'd like to just welcome everybody who's joined us here in the chat. We are coming to you live from my ready room here aboard the USS Dauntless, but joining us here in the screening room on the Dauntless Discord are some of our active duty personnel, which includes Captain Van Gruenen, we've got Colonel Yubert, we've got Lieutenant Kemmerly, we've got Chief Newton, Master Chief Kotzer, and Apprentice Matthews, who are joining us here live. If you are an active duty member of the USS Dauntless crew, you are welcome to join us here in the screening room for the recording sessions of these. You can chat with me live, ask me questions, anything like that if you like. If you are not an active duty member of the Dauntless, you can join us on YouTube. There is a live stream that's going out there as well. It is a slightly awkward time in which we record these things, sort of middle of the day on a Tuesday, South African Standard Time, which might not be the easiest time for most people to make it to, in which case that's fine. You're welcome to watch the video later on YouTube or on Facebook. We upload it there as well. Please feel free to drop any comments on any of those platforms so that we can address them, if not in real time, then perhaps in future episodes, and maybe even spin your question or comment into a whole separate video in the future, which would be nice. We'd like to be able to do that. All right, so let us switch to this view and we can recap exactly what mission readiness is. So our mission, when we use the word mission, we mean it in 2 different senses. The first one is our overarching mission, which is the function, the reason for the Dauntless existing, and that is to bring the message of Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of humankind to the people of Africa and the Middle East, which is clarified in a number of standing orders. And we also refer to mission in the sense of individual missions. Every time we embark on an activity, that is a discrete mission. So mission readiness is basically the state of being ready for both of those missions, both for the big overarching mission and being ready for each of our individual missions, as ready as we can be. And that relates to standing order number 2. There are 5 standing orders that clarify our mission. The first ones, standing orders number 1 and standing order number 2, are the most important ones. Standing order 2 being encourage initiatives to help bring about the future envisioned in Star Trek. So Star Trek, created by Gene Roddenberry, envisions a future in which most of the problems faced by humankind today have been largely, if not entirely, eradicated, at least on Earth, and it's sort of an idyllic utopian future. And we would like to, as an institution, as a movement, as an ideological collective, would like to help move our society closer to that idyllic future in whatever way we can. One of the ways that we embark on doing that is we work to better ourselves physically and mentally. The better we are, the better everybody else is, sort of on average, but also it means that we are more capable of engaging in missions, in engaging in activities to help bring about that idyllic future world. So in other words, the mental side of mission readiness, as opposed to the physical or emotional sides of mission readiness, the mental side is working to ensure that you possess the knowledge and skills to perform any duty you may be called upon to do. Now, obviously, we can't possess all skills or all knowledge, so we have to do our best to accumulate what we can. But that is kind of the point: is spending the time and resources we have available to us, accumulating those skills, that knowledge, and making sure that we are cognitively and intellectually ready for those missions as they arise. So, what does that mean? What skills and what knowledge should we be working to accumulate as Starfleet officers? Well, since we are a Star Trek fan club, the obvious starting point for that is Star Trek. We should be studying Star Trek. How do you do that? Well, the first step to studying Star Trek is watching Star Trek. There are close to 1,000 episodes of Star Trek at this point. Here's a spreadsheet that I maintain of all of the current episodes of Star Trek in chronological order, including some that haven't been released yet. We've got announcements of the Star Trek Starfleet Academy series, which is only going to be released perhaps next year or the year after. They're all in the list in chronological order, and this is quite a long list. So we want to be watching these episodes. This is the primary source material. And when we say the primary source material, we're talking about the canon. So that means all of the live action Star Trek series, including the original series, the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and then also some of the animated stuff like well, pretty much all the animated stuff, the animated series, Lower Decks, and Prodigy, of course, the spin-offs like Picard, also included in there as well. And the Star Trek Short Treks series are also canon. Captain Concurrent says, watching multiple times to boot, often because are things missed when watching the first 10 times. Yes, I agree. So what we do in order to encourage our crew to engage with the canon is we have, or I have a project that I operate within the crew. It's more of a personal project for myself, but I share it with the crew, and that is what I call our daily devotionals, in which I watch an episode of Star Trek every single day in chronological sequence, one after the other, from the beginning of canon, from the very first episode, chronologically speaking, all the way through to the end of canon, the very last episode, chronologically speaking, and then go back to the beginning again and start again. And gratifyingly, with the rate at which new Star Trek shows are being produced at the moment, every time we go through the entire canon, which takes but just under 3 years at the moment, by the time we get to the next go around, there is more content that's been added, which then slots in its appropriate chronological sequence, which then creates adds even more context and more content to that whole endeavor. And as the captain mentioned, every time you go through it, you catch stuff that you missed last time, perhaps because it was just a throwaway comment or something happening in the background. But now with that new content, you're looking at it with new eyes, and there's new context, so you can interpret some of that stuff in different ways. And it's always an interesting experience to rewatch through the entire canon in order. Now, you might be asking, what about what order do we watch it in? What do you mean chronological order? Well, those are complicated questions, and there are no clear answers to either of those. There is no definitive order in which to watch Star Trek. I have settled on a particular order that works for me. I have a set of rules by which I've decided to compile this spreadsheet, and you can agree or disagree with how I've done so. You're free to do that, but this is the order that I presented to the crew for our daily devotionals in, and this is the order in which we go through. Now, how do I present it to the crew? Well, we have a channel on our Discord, here, our Discord server, under the science category, called Future History. That's our little joke, which is invoking the spirit of the Galaxy Quest film, which was a sort of a parody of Star Trek in the late 90s, early aughts, in which they described the show that they were interested in, a show called Galaxy Quest, as being the historical documents. There was an alien race that had received the broadcasts of that show and had interpreted it as being real. So for the purposes of Star Trek apologetics, we treat the Star Trek canon as if it is factual, for as an intellectual exercise, and that we are studying these documents of our future that have been handed down to us or passed back to us through some kind of time travel accident, and we are reviewing those we are reviewing those historical documents. We're reviewing the history of the future. So that's the joke there. And every day our computer, posts what today's daily devotional episode is in that spot. So today's episode was Voyager Season 6, Episode 13, Virtuoso. It's an episode about where the Doctor becomes a musical celebrity on an alien planet in the Delta Quadrant. It's an interesting episode, and then we can engage in a conversation about that episode here in that context when everybody's had a chance to catch up. Now, not everybody's going to watch every single episode every day. Even I don't watch an episode every single day, but what I do try to keep up with the schedule of the daily devotionals. If I fall behind, I'll double up my episode viewing for a few days until I catch up. Maybe I'll go ahead a little bit if I decide to shotgun a few episodes one after the other, and then I will lay off it for a few days to let everybody else catch up and that kind of thing. But on average, we're trying to watch one episode a day so that we can try and keep our timing synced with this kind of thing. So every day the episode is dropped here. It's also posted on the Dauntless calendar. If you go to our Dauntless website, you go to the schedule page. Not only do you see a list of all of our missions, but one of the things you see listed here on the schedule page is our daily devotional. So if you'd like to see which episodes are coming up, or you would like to search and see which when a particular episode you're interested in is going to appear on the schedule, you can do it from there. You can also add this to your own Google Calendar using the plus Google Calendar button at the bottom so that it can appear on your Google Calendar, so you don't have to come to our website every time you want to take a look and see what's coming up. So that is the primary way in which we study Star Trek. Of course, there is also the other way with new Star Trek. As each new episode comes out, we try to have a watch party here on the Dauntless on that typically Friday night. New episodes usually drop on a Thursday, South African time. So by the time it gets to Friday, there's been enough time for those episodes to propagate out to the various international distribution media, if they exist. And then we can gather together here in the screening room in the same channel in Discord and enjoy that episode together on that Friday night, and then we can chat about it in real time. That's why we no longer have a spoiler policy on board, because we're now watching every single new episode of Star Trek as they come out the following week. It was a little bit challenging with Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, which dropped on Netflix a few weeks ago now as we're recording this, because the entire 20 episodes second season was dropped on the same day. So we had to spend a few weeks catching up on that, watching a few episodes at a time, because a 4-hour marathon was not practical for all of us, but we made it work. And we are now up to date on all of our new Star Trek. Excuse me, my non-human companion has decided to chip into the conversation, so if you hear a cheeping sound, that is him. Let's see, we've got some comments here in the chat. Colonel Bear says, yes, I'm rewatching Picard now and I miss so much. Yes, quite right. Especially shows like Picard or Lower Decks are really designed to sort of layer upon layer the Star Trek references, the internal references. So if the more context you have from the rest of canon, the more you're going to get out from watching those kinds of shows. Lieutenant Kimberly says, why are you calling me out like this, Captain? Yes, indeed. Yes. So this is an experience that we share. Of course, we're still some time away from getting to the Picard part of canon in our daily devotionals, but we'll get there soon enough. Captain Van Keurne says, because I'm rowing the same boat, Papa have opinions. Yes, he does. Morsel does have opinions. He is ensconced in his little bed on a chair next to me here. So I'm not going to show you what he looks like right now, but he's picked up a new behavior recently where he decides to chime in whenever I'm involved in an online meeting. He has to have his say. Yes, right. So that is how we encourage the study of Star Trek. Excuse me. But there are other ways that we can do that as well. And one of the resources that we can tap in order to do that is what used to be called Starfleet Academy, which is now called the Starfleet International's Educational Services. We can no longer call it Starfleet Academy because there is now the new Star Trek series coming out that has that name, and Paramount have asked us to stop using that name. So Educational Services is the new name for our internal education branch. And that is, although we still use the term academy informally, I believe that is no longer the official term for that part of our institution. So Starfleet International is our parent organization. The USS Dauntless is a chapter of Starfleet International, and Starfleet has a number of other internal structures that are aimed to provide support to our thousands of members and hundreds of chapters in dozens of countries around the world. And one of those is Educational Services, which provides an internal education institution run by Starfleet volunteers, and it is free for all all members of Starfleet International, if you are a card-carrying member of SFI, you have full access to educational services, and you can study all of the courses that they have on offer. Well, what kind of courses do they have on offer? Well, there is an extensive catalog. So this is the most recent catalog that I was able to find, and the index alone is half a dozen pages. So, and that's just the different categories that are available. If we just scroll quickly through the various courses, you can see there are hundreds and hundreds of courses available, many of which, a significant portion, I don't have the numbers, I haven't done an analysis, but a significant portion of these courses relate directly to Star Trek, but looking at it from various different angles, whether we're looking at it from a cultural point of view or a biological or a military, if we're looking at it episode by episode or looking at general trends at specific technologies. All of these things are available in the Starfleet Educational Services, or just the Academy, and you can look through those and do those courses at your leisure. The only restriction that the Academy asks is please no more than 10 courses at a time, because there are volunteers who run these courses who need an opportunity to go through the exam papers that you've submitted and mark them. Although a lot of them are now automated, they are being marked by computer, it does still require a human volunteer to verify the results before they get added to your record. So please don't overwhelm the course administrators with excessive exam requests, but please feel free to avail yourself of that opportunity as much as you can if you are an SFI member in good standing. Colonel Ubay says, there are so many. There are indeed so many. I feel like there are more options in educational services than I have in real life. That's probably true. Although that said, there are other institutions that are available that we can appeal to. But as Starfleet officers, although Star Trek is a logical place to start, and I feel that Star Trek provides us a good grounding for a well-rounded education, at least a good starting point for a lot of different topics, especially if we're looking through a place like Starfleet Academy, Starfleet Educational Services. It's going to take me a while to get used to that one. There's more that goes into a well-rounded education, especially an ongoing education, than just Star Trek. And Star Trek being a good springboard, I think, can lead us to a lot of other interesting and stimulating and valuable fields of study. So let me just pull this up because I don't have thingies for all of it. There we go. All right, so just so you've got something to rest your eyes on while we're talking about this for a while. Lieutenant Kimberly says, my bad, I did 20-something in a row to get through the communications prerequisites. I think it was 26 in a row. I'm sure they would have sent you an email and complained if it really was an issue, but generally speaking, the rule of 10 is how they requested we do it these days. And yes, enthusiasm is appreciated, Colonel Uber. Right, so what are we talking about when we mean a well-rounded education? So there are a number of different fields of study that I think any Starfleet officer should have at least a good fundamental grounding in, a basic understanding, in order to sort of understand your context within the universe, how we're here, how everything works around you, and your place within the world. And I'm going to break those down into sort of broader categories. So one of them is the humanities. So the things we're looking to learn from the humanities really is skills like critical thinking and understanding alternate perspectives. And this is something that is emphasized over and over again in Star Trek, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And where we get that, I feel, is studying the humanities. So what is that? So we're talking about linguistics, and I mean linguistics from two different points of view. Firstly, I mean linguistics as in learning different languages. The more languages we can learn, the more people we can communicate with, the more we're able to open our perspectives to the way that other people see things, but also learning about languages themselves, lexicography, understanding how languages relate to each other, different language families, how they originate, where they come from, their distribution both through space and time, and understanding how all of that stuff works, because the evolution and structure and relatedness of languages teaches us a lot about the history of the human race and how we have developed over the millennia. There's also philosophy, and possibly one of the most fundamental grounding of any basic education is understanding philosophy, and especially when we talk about epistemology. How do we know things? What are the different ways of knowing? Well, there's really only one way of knowing, but that's something that's an interesting question to discover. How do you explore the universe? How do we know things about what's going on? How do we learn things? How do we know what we know? Epistemology is where all of that stuff comes from. And then the other side of philosophy that's very important, especially from a Starfleet point of view, is ethics. How do we decide what's right and what's wrong? How do we understand which is the right choice in any given moment? Philosophy is the branch of study where all of that kind of thing comes from. And then there's looking at the more sort of practical side of that, which is history and literature, understanding how we've developed the epistemological and philosophical systems that we have, how we've developed um, linguistics, how we've developed literature itself over time by understanding the historical context in which those things happen. So history and literature are the backbone of that. Literature, of course, is the body of work that we have produced over the millennia, we as a species. That's in the form of writing, of theater, of film, of comic books, video games. I mean, those are more modern forms of literature, but they're literature nonetheless. Star Trek, of course, is a form of literature in itself. Understanding the literature helps you to understand how people of different times and places thought about themselves, how they considered themselves situated in the universe, and then the history of that sort of surrounds the literature, the literal the the literary canon. That's the word I'm looking for. The literary canon of a given cultural context, and we can understand what was really going on in the world in which the literature was created. Those two things feed off each other because a lot of the time, the only real historical perspective we have of people of a given time and place is the literature they have. So that's those two are they go hand in hand. And also related to that is religion. So this is the place that people think of themselves being within the cosmic order of things. So that relates specifically to the mythology and also the ideology of various religions. Those two things relate to each other, but they're not identical. Mythology and literature, of course, are they work together. Ideology takes us back to philosophy and ethics. What do people think is right? What do people think of their place in the world? So religion is an important thing to understand. Even if we are not believers ourselves, it matters to people. Most people in the world are believers of some religion or another. So understanding what those religions do, what they preach, what they contain, and what they espouse helps us to understand the people who are adherents of those faiths, even if we don't share their adherence. And then there's the arts. I mean, we've spoken about literature already, but there are other forms of art as well, both visual and performing. So painting, sculpture, pottery, music, theater, film, photography. All of these it's very important to understand. And these go hand in hand with literature in that they give us a window into the minds and the souls of people who have lived through all of human history and even contemporary people living in cultural contexts that are not our own. We can get a perspective into their way of seeing through their art, through their creative material that they produce. So that's the humanities, but also very important is the sciences. So in other words, we're looking to understand the physical world, and again, critical thinking, because we're back to that epistemology. How do we know what we know? Well, we know what we know by looking at the world, and how do we test the world to find out what's true and what isn't? And that's the endeavor of science. And there we're talking about biology, we're talking about the physical stuff that our bodies are made of and other living things around us. We're talking about chemistry, sort of that's biology at an even lower level, more fundamental level. We're talking about the chemicals that the universe is made of. Lieutenant Kimberly says science never makes an advance until philosophy authorizes it to do so. Well, yes, that's true, because I mean, science originated as a branch of philosophy. It was originally known as natural philosophy, the philosophy of nature, and has only in the last couple hundred years developed an existence of its own. But the two are inextricably linked. One informs the other and still continues to do so even today. Then we're talking about physics. We're talking about how bodies in the world, whether it be that human bodies or individual electrons or planets, quasars, galaxies, bodies in the world interact with each other, and how that can be measured, how it can be tested and predicted. All of that happens. So we're talking about fields like astronomy, astrophysics, theoretical physics. These are things that come up all the time in Star Trek. The better we can understand real world physics in those branches, the better we can understand what's happening in the Star Trek universe, and vice versa. Many astronomers who are today practicing in that field, real world scientists, were inspired to take on that profession by watching Star Trek when they were young. Then we've got to talk about environmental science. So this relates to biology, but it's not only biology, it's biology in a physical context. So we're talking about biodiversity and climate science, about the world around us and how that affects the biology that we inhabit. And then there's medicine, which is another branch of biology, but it relates specifically, well, more to humans, but also to non-humanoids. And we're talking about things like health management, illness prevention, and physical fitness. Um, Master Chief Kutza says, wonder who said evolution is unavoidable, survival is optional. I mean, that sounds like the kind of thing that Darwin might have said, but I don't recall if that was an explicit quote of his. Lieutenant Kimberly says, W. Edwards Deming said, it's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory, which is close enough, right? Yeah, that's similar. Some of the philosophy of science, you can see how those two pursuits are inextricably linked even today. But taking a step deeper than science, we need to also look at a field like mathematics. So we're looking there at logical reasoning and quantitative analysis. So what about managing our personal finances? If we can't afford to pay our SFI membership, which is not that much, it's $10 a year, but if you can't afford to do that, well, there's something wrong. And how do we fix that? Well, we need to have a working knowledge of our personal finances in order to manage our income and expenditures in that way. It's also helpful to understand the broader economic context in which our personal finances function, because those two things communicate with each other. Economics are quite important to understand as well. And then the other side of it is engineering. It helps to understand the laws by which the physical structures around us are built. Not only the homes that we live in, but the equipment that we use. And also, if we are needing to improvise or make repairs to equipment that we have, it helps to understand the principles that govern them so that we can do that kind of work. And then, of course, there is the social sciences. So we're learning more about human behavior, social structures, and politics. And what we want to learn about there is psychology. We want to understand the thought processes that help guide us and each other and to do the things that we do. We need to understand sociology, which is that same pursuit, but at a larger scale. So now we're talking about the psychology of groups of people, and then also political sciences, how we, as citizens of the world, choose the leaders that who govern our countries and who administer our municipal and national structures. How do all of those things work? We're talking about things like democracy versus sovereignty and that kind of thing. Those are important questions to understand how all of those things relate to each other, and we can learn a lot from that kind of thing from, again, history and literature, because those questions have been thoroughly examined for millennia. So those are that I think encapsulates what a well-rounded education for a Starfleet officer should look like. But what if you didn't study those things at school? What if you didn't study them in university? Well, I don't think that matters at all. I think we can, as adults, and I think we're all pretty much adults. We have no cadets on board the Dauntless at the moment anyway. Most of us are adults. Ongoing education is really an imperative faced by every adult, really, but especially by Starfleet officers. We should be doing whatever we can to educate ourselves, whatever we can do. I beg your pardon, my non-human companion is demanding attention. I'm going to release him from his little nest, see what he wants to do. Apologies. Morsel is ridiculous. All right, so where was I? Oh yes, it's an imperative that we as Starfleet officers do what we can to accumulate the knowledge and skills relating to the framework that I just outlined. Now, where do we do that? How do we do that? Well, Starfleet Educational Services is a good starting point for that. You can get a lot of basic education from there, especially as it relates to the Star Trek universe, but not exclusively so. But there's more that we can be doing. There are other tools that we can go to. Let's go back to there. I can show you what some of those are. So, like the Starfleet Educational Services, there are other free online resources, things like Coursera. So Coursera, I'm not advertising Coursera. This is not a plug, but they and institutes like them are effectively free online universities. So you can, through this service, and there are plenty of others like them, you can sign up for free and watch their lectures. You can take their courses. Some of them you can even complete exams for free. Some of them require you to pay pay a nominal fee if you want to actually obtain the certification. But they are well structured and they are well resourced. They have good qualified people hosting the courses. So something like Coursera is a good place to go as a resource that you can tap to help with your self-education. You can, of course, go to something like YouTube. There, a lot of the same content of the same quality is available there as well, but there's also a lot of poor quality content on YouTube, and trying to figure out which is the good stuff and which stuff is not can be quite challenging in an open marketplace of ideas like that. Whereas somewhere like Coursera or other similar institutions have already done that work for you, and the stuff that you're getting there is typically very good. Khan Academy is another good example of that. I think they focus more on IT subjects, if I'm not mistaken, but the model is similar. So there are plenty of good places where you can do that kind of thing. And if you like me don't enjoy that kind of structured classroom style learning, even if you're sitting by yourself in front of a computer, I prefer something a bit more um, environmental, something that's kind of always in my head and always around. I prefer podcasts. This is my self-education medium of choice. So somewhere like Spotify or YouTube Music or iTunes they all have colossal libraries of podcasts, many of which are very high quality. There's a bit of the same problem that YouTube has, in that it is something of an open market of ideas. So there's a lot of poor quality content in there as well, and it can be a non-trivial problem to sort through the dodgy stuff to find the good stuff. But if you spend enough time on it, you can find the good stuff, and there is plenty of good content on Spotify. That's my platform of choice, but you're free to use whichever one you like. This is just the one that I like. A lot of really good content, and I find that I'm able to switch from one subject to another, whether I'm listening through an entire catalog of a given podcast on a specific topic, or I can wait for new episodes to be released. And then this morning I'm studying history, and the next thing I'm studying politics, and the next thing I'm studying criminal psychology. It allows me to chop and change these topics in a way that I don't feel like I'm getting stale on any given thing. So that's why I enjoy podcasts as my preferred medium, but yours may vary. But what about learning more practical skills? So this is very passive. I'm just absorbing the information, which I find works for me. But a lot of people prefer to do something more practical in the world. Well, something like Duolingo is a great tool for that. And this is something that is supported internally by the Dauntless. So we have our monthly linguistics challenge, in which we each are encouraged to sign up to Duolingo, which is a language learning application, and study languages as much as possible. The crew member with the highest XP that they've earned during the month wins the challenge every month, and that all happens via Duolingo. Duolingo is free, and you can study one of the languages. They've got dozens of different languages to choose from, whether you want proper languages like German or French, or you want fictional languages. Klingon is in there. You can see I've already selected Klingon here. It's one of the languages you can choose to study through Duolingo, which might be helpful within a Star Trek context. But you can study languages for free on Duolingo, and you can also participate with us in our linguistics challenge, which is great. It's good fun. We also have another new challenge, which we've only implemented a few months ago, but it's looking like it might stick around, and that is our reading challenge. I'm not going to show you the internal documents that support that, but the Dauntless has a community on Goodreads, where our crew members are able to chat and collaborate with our various reading challenge related activities. And what is a reading challenge? Well, we are each encouraged to read as much as we can, and then submit the pages that we've read to a competitive spreadsheet that Colonel Hubert administers for us every month. And at the end of every month, the winning person who's read the most pages wins bragging rights for the month, which is fun. And it also encourages us all to read as much as possible. So, and there's no limitation on what we're encouraged to read. You get bonus points if the content that you're reading is Star Trek related, but that doesn't mean you have to only read Star Trek related stuff. You can read whatever you like, as long as you're reading, as long as you're learning, as long as you're studying. Even if you're reading fiction, you're still studying literature. That's still part of it. That's part of a well-rounded education. So these are the various different tools that we recommend for establishing a well-rounded education. So to building your cognitive/mental side of mission readiness is an essential thing if you want to become physically or mentally ready for those missions. I'm just going to go back to that. There we go. So we want to be as ready as we can to perform the missions that are presented to us as they come up. So physical readiness, we've already discussed in a different video, is of vital importance. You need to be able to lift the heavy things that need lifting. You need to be able to give blood when you can. But mental readiness is also of vital importance. Not only are the two related, because your physical fitness and physical wellness relates to your cognitive and mental capabilities. That we, as we spoke about in the other video, your cardiovascular fitness helps get oxygen to your brain, helps get deliver glucose to your brain, and glucose is the fuel that your brain feeds on. So if you're not eating carbs and you're not getting blood to your brain, you're not going to be able to think very well. The fitter you are, the better you can think, the better you can recall stuff, the better you can learn stuff, and the better you can solve problems. And that's really what we're talking about here, is being ready and able to solve problems that need solving. The more knowledge and skills that you've acquired during your lifetime, the more resources you have to draw on, mental resources you have to draw on when you need to solve problems. You need to figure out how to do things. You're faced with a dilemma or some kind of a puzzle that needs solving as part of a mission. The more cognitive tools you have at your disposal, the easier it is for you to do that kind of thing. So mental aspects of mission readiness are crucial, and they are intertwined inextricably with the physical side of mission readiness: physical fitness, mental fitness, and we'll be covering in another video soon emotional fitness, are vital three components of mission readiness. Chief Newton has, on the point of linguistics, we have Apprentice Matthews does not have access to the Wednesday campaigns or #linguistics. Okay, so what happens is, when you are a member of the crew, if you wish to be assigned to a particular project, you go to the all hands category on the Dauntless Discord. Let me see if I can show you that here. Let's see if that will do it. Right, so if we go to the all hands category here and you go to project assignment, here is listed a bunch of projects that you can select from, and if you just click on the relevant emoji at the bottom here that corresponds to the project you want to be assigned to, it will automatically grant you the relevant access. So if you want to talk about linguistics training, you click on the little EDIC logo there. It will then grant you access to the EDIC, to the linguistics channel. The Awareness Day campaigns channel, however, is restricted to the science department. That is a science project that they work on behalf of the rest of the crew. So when there is relevant information that comes out of the Awareness Day campaigns project, that will be presented to the rest of the crew, typically on the bridge. So that's how that works. All right, I think that is all we have to cover for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. And we're going to continue this next week again with the third leg of mission readiness, which will be emotional readiness. Thank you for joining us here again. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them on YouTube, Facebook, Discord, Telegram, smoke signals, whatever platform you feel is appropriate. And we will address